Once upon a time, there was this old man and old woman that lived together in a small wood cabin just outside of town. They were a quiet couple that lived together their whole life, barely noticeable to the folks living around them. One day there came a knock at the door when only the old man was home. Upon opening the door, the old man was shocked to find 3 people standing outside, dressed in robes with horse masks on. Bewildered, the old man stood as the bizarre trio rattled off a strange nursery rhyme and then handed him a vase. After closing the door and peeking out the window to make sure the surreal party had moved on, he turned his attention to the note left with the vase. The instructions read, "This vase has the power to restore youth." But the youth one could receive did not just come from the vase on its own. To receive the youth, it had to be given or taken from someone else who pours their years as they pour from the vase. A person must pour liquid from the vase, pouring their years into the liquid that can then be consumed or simply rubbed into the skin. In doing so, a person transfers their vitality and years to another. A person can completely be restored to their youth, but it must be remembered that the vase takes the youth and years from the one who pours from it, whether they know it or not. All that is required is the person pour liquid from the vase. Cult crazies, he thought, scoffing at the letter in his hand, but he decided to keep the matter to himself and not tell his wife when she returned home. She will just mock me, he thought, and then scold him for even opening the door to possibly dangerous strangers wearing masks. But as the weeks went on, he couldn't help himself wondering, what if? So one day he takes his magical gift to the marketplace and asks the first boy he found to pour him a glass. Young boys always want to get older faster, he thought, rationalizing the possibility this could actually do what the note claimed. So he drank from the cup the water poured out by the boy with little faith or expectation. But no sooner than he felt the liquid reach his stomach, he immediately felt the warm vigor of youth spread through him like spring blessing over a parched desert land. Without a doubt, at that moment he knew it was true. Wasting no time, the old man sprinted as fast as he could back home to his wife. "We are going out," he declared enthusiastically. Now he still didn't tell her about the vase, or the strange horse-faced people who gave it to him. Although he wasn't a cunning man, he was smart enough to know not to tell anyone what was going on. There was still much he didn't know himself, like how much youth and years the vase took with each glass. For all he knew, a couple glasses could kill the person pouring the liquid. So he was careful. One person here, one person there. Little pour here, little pour there, and not all in one night either. He would be smart about this. No one, even his wife, could know what was happening. When his wife finally realized they both were getting younger, he told her he didn't know what was happening. So she assumed a god had answered her prayers for youth because she always felt she did not appreciate or take advantage of her youth while she was young. Night after night they went out, and morning after morning they woke younger and younger. They were both so happy the joy in the house was almost palpable. The breeze and the birds seemed to cheer them on as they once again welcomed their youth and vigor. But once they seemed to reach their early 20s, the man pulled back, desiring to take a break from their nightly outings in town. He, of course, enjoyed his return to youth, but was reluctant to keep pushing it. They could both end up children at this rate, he thought, and someone could start suspecting something. Although they were careful to visit different places each night, this kind of change can't go unnoticed forever. So he suggested to his wife that they should stay home for a while. Besides, going out was expensive, and even though they were suddenly young, they still had to watch their finances. But after a few weeks, the wife of the man grew tired of being at home. She did not want to waste her youth like she felt she did before, so she told her husband she was going to go to the market for a while just to look around. But the next day she went out again, and the next day as well. And it wasn't long before her window shopping trips to the market lasted all day long. Day after day this continued, even into the night on one occasion. After catching her quietly sneaking back into the house one night, he was sure something was very, very wrong. So the next day, he told her he would go with her to the market. She was noticeably not pleased with this, but didn't object directly for fear of furthering his apparent suspicions. As they browsed through the marketplace, he made it a point to introduce himself as her husband to whoever they came across. This revelation seemed to noticeably shock a few that glanced at his wife, not knowing how to react. As the day drew on, he noticed men nodding in his direction and laughing. He even caught a couple pointing and shaking their head. They were obviously laughing at him, and he had been around long enough to know what they were laughing about. To add insult to injury, when it was time to go, his wife refused, telling him she will be home later and that he should go ahead home without her. Again, the men's laughter rang in his ears as he slunk back down the road towards his little cabin just outside of town. That night, his wife didn't come home at all and tried to sneak in right as the sun rose. He couldn't believe she was doing this to him. After a lifetime together, after him looking after her his whole life, after him sharing the vase and restoring her to her youth. Again, the next night she was gone, but this night he sat and considered what he was to do. What was done, and there was no going back. He sat and sobbed. He wished the vase had never come to him. He took out a pen and began writing a dire warning concerning the vase, what it was and what it did, and how, although it restores youth, could be the end of one's life. That night, his wife didn't come home at all. The next morning, she didn't even bother sneaking in at dawn. When he confronted her, she answered curtly with agitation, saying, "I'm not going to waste my life just sitting here in this house. I'm not!" The man didn't even argue. He just nodded his head and asked if she could at least help him a little today. Disgusted that he wasn't even going to be a man and fight with her about where she's been, she rolled her eyes and told him she'll help after she took a nap. When she finally woke up and began getting ready for the night, he reminded her she had agreed to help him a little today. "Fine," she spit, agitated. "It can't be long. I'm meeting my friends later," she hissed. "It will only take 20 or 30 minutes, he responded in a defeated tone. "Afterwards, you can do whatever you like." "I have to fill this vase with water," he explained. "I then put these perfume petals in it, let them soak, and then the vase needs to be poured in the tub. I'm soaking some pieces of wood for a project, and the water has to have these oils in it. So I will fill this vase, let the petals soak, and then you pour the vase into the bath after exactly 5 minutes of soaking. Meanwhile, I will be going back and forth from the well, refilling the bucket. We will do this a few times, and then you can go." He ended. It was weird, but she thought, whatever, anything to leave this stuffy wooden cage with this poor excuse for a man. So she poured the first pitcher of water into the bath. Immediately she felt dizzy. She had to sit down. What was that? She thought. Second pour. Again she felt as if someone struck her in the jaw. Was it a hangover? She mulled. But she was young, and the night before did not affect her like this. Third pour. Again she saw stars. Maybe I need more sleep. That vase felt like it weighed 100 pounds. She whispered to herself, hunched over. You don't look well, the man commented, returning with the fourth bucket. Maybe you shouldn't go out tonight, he suggested. She shot him an aggravated look. His comment strengthened her resolve. I just need out this house, she thought. I'm fine, she replied as he poured the water into the vase. He shrugged and walked out the house for another trip. The fourth pour was awful. I just need some food, she thought as she struggled to pick up the vase. She glanced down at her hands. They looked thin and worn. Look what all this water has done to my skin, she whined. Maybe I should stay home. She poured the vase a fourth time, and again her head went spinning. That's it, I'm done, she thought. He can pour it himself, she mumbled to herself and stumbled out the door. She hobbled down the road. Why was walking so hard? She asked herself. I just need some food and I'll be fine. She saw her husband and prepared for an argument about why she was leaving before he was done, but to her surprise, he didn't say anything as she passed. He just looked at her as she walked by. Oddly, she thought she detected pity in his face. He should pity me, she thought. Putting up with him all these years, 3 kids, this little house, I'm not making this mistake again. Divorce, she thought. Why not? Her kids were all grown and moved out. There is no reason we need to be together. People don't even recognize us anymore. We might as well be living a completely different life. Finally, she saw her friend. A new friend she made recently and had been out with many times in the last few months. She waved, but her friend returned only a curious stare. She waved again. Her friend didn't seem to recognize her. Maria, she called. Suddenly, a look of recognition came over her friend's face, but then one of terrible concern. Oh my God, she cried. What's wrong? Not expecting the response, but not totally surprised, she said, I don't feel good. I think I just need some food." "Oh my God!" her friend exclaimed again, staring at her intently. Her friend kept staring as she ushered her into the bar. Her continual gaze was more than she expected, and she repeated, "I just need some food." "What?" Her friend stared with worried fascination. "What?" she cried. "You look—" But she didn't continue. "What?" she cried again. "Your skin," she muttered. She looked down at her hands. Terror gripped her. They were the hands of a very old woman. "Oh no," she stammered, glancing back and forth. "No," she cried desperately. I'm losing it," she muttered tearfully. She looked down at her hands. They were wrinkling before her eyes, as if time was speeding up. "I need to get home," she thought. She tried to leap up, but her knees buckled. She fell to the ground. The bar stopped and stared in horror as the old woman aged in front of their faces. At last, she made one last attempt to get up, but shook and collapsed in front of them all. There she lied, stone-cold dead in the middle of the floor with everyone around her gasping in horror. The large group of people approached the small cottage. It took a while figuring out who the dead woman was and where she lived. Some in the crowd were just curious because rumors had already spread that the dead woman had appeared for the last few months to be a woman in her 20s, but had somehow overnight turned back into the old woman a few older folks knew lived in this cottage. The word witch and magic had already been thrown around, so finding out what her husband had to say was something many of them just couldn't wait to hear. Others had said the woman had appeared in town with a young man claiming to be her husband. Could both of them have found some way to reverse time? But any hope of questioning the husband quickly faded as they all crowded around the front porch. For the front door was wide open, and all of them could immediately see the grim silhouette of a young man hovering above the floor, swinging ever so slightly in full view. There, at the end of the rope, hung their last hopes of finding out what happened here, and how, at least for a time, this quiet couple managed to turn back the clock and fully regain their youth.